Guys, it's time to talk about a line that has really grown on me in this past year, that being Alternators, and also Alternity. I could just do top 5 Alternators, but then that's going to be all 5 of the Alternators that I own. Meanwhile, I do own 3 Alternity figures, which is to say 3 of the 4 Seekers they did, so I figure why not just combine the two. Alternity was a sequel series to Alternators after all, and I do keep all these guys on the same shelf together. And I'll point this out, right? People might look at this and say like, wow, Ron Bonnajon must not like Alternators. Not the case. I love Alternators. The thing is, Alternators are kind of hard to come by nowadays. They're not very expensive, at least, considering their age and everything. The thing is, I like to find my toys in the wild now. I like to find them in person. That's part of the way that I keep collecting fun, is I don't just go on eBay and order stuff. So, these are all guys that I've just been able to find out and about. That's what kind of made them more special to me, is discovering them that way. There's a lot of Alternators figures I would really love to own, like Trax and both the Ravages, but for the time being, this is the lineup, and we're gonna go now into my top 5 favorite Alternators and Alternity figures. The only rule, as always, is that they have to be figures I own in my collection. Let's get to it. At number 5, it's Alternity Banzaitron. I'll be honest, it was really hard to figure out who my number 5 should be. Numbers 1 through 4, easy as could be. But in all honesty, everyone else on the shelf had a chance to make it into the top 5. The reason I went with Banzaitron is because, 1, he's using the Alternity Thundercracker mold, and even though he's a lot more loose, he doesn't have quite as good QC as Thundercracker, the figure is still fun. It's a good transformation, and a secret that turns into a car is always going to be funny. The thing that helps is Banzaitron has a great deco. Even though I think Thundercracker is still the best use of this mold, I honestly think Banzaitron is the second best. Starscream's kind of boring. Skywarp is nice, but there's a little too much purple. Here, I love that we have almost like an Evangelion look. Like, those are Banzaitron's colors, but I feel like by really focusing in on the green and the black, it really feels like EVA Unit 1. Past that, I love the small things, like the red face and the Decepticon logo still being clearly seen. It's a good figure, a great transformation, and I do wish it was more playable. To this day, Thundercracker is still the best feeling Alternity figure I've ever messed with. Banzaitron, like Skywarp, is still stiff in a lot of places and loose in places like the ankles and the wings. He's not the most poseable guy in the world, he's not the most fun guy in the world, but he is undoubtedly a very pretty figure and would look good on any shelf. And besides, it's a high-end Banzaitron. Who had high-end Banzaitron on their bingo card? I didn't, and yet here we are. At number 4, it's Alternators Hound. Now, there's a lot going in favor of this guy. For one, his Jeep Wrangler vehicle mode is gorgeous. Past that, I love the colors here. I think this was the first time an Alternator actually looked like the classic character. And that's another thing I should bring up about Hound. He was kind of the first time that everyone in the fandom agreed, yeah, they rocked it. Optimus Prime was a pretty bad robot. Sideswipe, very much the same. It was when Silver Streak and Hound came out that it really started to turn the corner. Hound especially was a moment in the fandom where we realized, yeah, you can do high-end Transformers consistently for not a whole lot of money. And after that, we started to get some of the best Alternators, some of the best Transformers of all time. In that way, Hound is incredibly important. I do have some issues with him still, especially in the lower body. He's very hard to keep balanced, but things like his proportions and especially his head sculpt really help sell me on this figure. He's not my favorite Hound of all time, but he's very high up there. And just look at him. Such a cheeky little guy. I bet he's thinking about how much he likes the rain or birds or how he wishes he could be human. Hound is the cutest of all the boys, and he is also here to tell us about nature and putting out forest fires or something. I don't know. It seems like he would like Smokey the Bear. I would not be surprised to find out that Hound has like a Smokey the Bear bumper sticker somewhere. That seems like the type of character Hound would vibe with. At number 3, it's a toy that really surprised me. It's Alternators Smokescreen. And I had Silver Streak before I had Smokescreen. I have the older version of this mold and I thought it was fine. But in Smokescreen, he's honestly my second favorite Alternator and my third favorite on this list. He's just so eye-catching. And even though in the review that I'm going to post of this guy very soon, I make the point that he doesn't feel that much like G1 Smokescreen, but the more I've sat with him, the more I realize that even though he doesn't have the red, he's perfect for a G1 Smokescreen, a perfect modernization of Smokescreen, turning him into a rally car, still giving him all that race car feel. I love all the decos throughout him. I love all the little placements for the sponsors of the Subaru Rally team. And I did some research. Turns out, yes, this actually is a car that had real human drivers, and those are the names that are on his back windshield. I love things like this. I love it when there's actually some history behind vehicle modes. And Smokescreen himself, I think he is borderline perfect as a toy. I love his head sculpt. I love his proportions. I do wish he had some modern articulation. He really could have used an upper arm cut. But with everything this guy has going for him, I don't think you need it. He's just a handsome looking boy. He's gonna go in, he's gonna gamble his friends away, and then he's gonna have to team up with a bounty hunter named DevCon. Exactly what I want out of a Smokescreen. Now you go, bud. You go and you let your crippling addiction ruin your life. I love you, gambler. And then there were two. So when I announced I was going to do a top 5 Alternators video, I saw a lot of people assume, well, Alternator Shockblast has to be number 1, and to be sure, he is my favorite Alternator. But I think what a lot of people forgot is that I'd include Alternity in this list. And I always praise Alternity Thundercracker as being, in my opinion, one of the best high-end Transformers ever made by Hasbro or Takara. These two both have legitimate claim to being some of my favorite Transformers of all time. And now they're going to have to share a list together. And my question is, who becomes number 1? Is it Shockblast with his perfect head sculpt, great size, and wonderful vehicle mode? Or is it Thundercracker with his paint, his sculpted beauty, and just the fact that at the end of the day, I'm always more of a Thundercracker fan than a Shockwave fan? I did my best to be objective here, and I know that this list is based on my favorites, but it was important for me to figure out which of these two would I actually say is the better figure overall. And I think I know who my number 2 is. Number 2, it's Alternator Shockblast. Let me make this abundantly clear, this is my favorite Shockwave toy of all time, and I still love him. He would be number 1 on any other list. But there are some issues that could hold him back for a lot of people. 1, his feet are hard to work with. You got the big wheels right there in the hill, so he can fall over pretty easily. And 2, his transformation, even though it's great, especially by Alternator standards, there's still some finickiness there. I love this Shockblast, I do. I love this Shockwave. He is so fun. He is the leader of the Parliament of Shockwave for a reason. It's because he is near perfect as a toy. But notice what I just said there. He is near perfect. I think number 1 is a perfect toy. Number 1, it is Alternity Thundercracker. Let's just run down the list. An incredibly unique robot mode, a wonderful transformation, a great vehicle mode. The robot mode has many different influences, not only from samurai armor, but also the G1 design with the pylons and the wings and the null rays, and even some insectoid features in the face. The head sculpt is absolutely gorgeous. Let's actually pull him in so you can see. The little hits of purple do so much, and that paint job. Still my favorite paint job on any toy ever. That electric blue is everything I live for. If I had to get rid of every other Thundercracker, with the exception of my childhood Thundercracker, I would. But I would keep this guy. To me, he is the pinnacle of Transformers design for the adult collector. He is a difficult transformation, but a rewarding one. He is a robot mode that maybe isn't the most articulate, but is heavily influenced by a unique aesthetic and design unlike anything else seen in Super Robots, Transformers, or any other type of mecha toy. He is a pinnacle of Transformers design, at least from my viewpoint. And whereas Shockwave is a wonderful evolution, Thundercracker feels like a new species, an entirely new school of thought as to how to make a transforming toy. He's more unique, he's more fresh, and there are many things about him that are deeply flawed. But the sheer spirit of this Thundercracker is without match, and it makes it my favorite Alternator or Alternity toy that I own. My top 3 back in here, a thing I always want to say about Alternators, that I love them for how unique they are. They'll never come back. We'll probably never see these designs ever again. But the era of Transformers that these existed in, that era of reinvention, spearheaded by designers like Aaron Archer, a time in which they weren't constrained by G1 nostalgia and were just beginning to dip their toes back into the original characters, it was some of the most fun ever in Transformers. I love the era we're in now. We get better toys on the whole nowadays than we did back then. But that doesn't change the fact that the fiction and all the media, the comics, and the video games, a few of them that there were, like the Atari Transformers Armada game, they're all things that nowadays could never be greenlit, but for their times were incredible. Alternators is a gateway back to that old type of thinking. They are a gateway back to a time in which there was a point in which the name Megatron could have been left to be lost by Hasbro. A time in which maybe we were okay with not having Bumblebee but sticking with Hotshot, or maybe inventing entirely new characters. It's a time that I kind of wish we could go back to in some ways. A removal of the legacy component of Transformers, and more a celebration of everything new and innovative in Transformers. I still hope for a day in which we get a cartoon in which we get an entire cast of new guys. To be fair, that's part of what we had in Earthspark, but, of course, people were not able to see Earthspark, didn't give Earthspark a chance. Just remember, there was a time in which we were excited for the new, and not scared of it.